the age of 9, dropped off at an orphanage, having to figure life out all by himself. But Stephen Biondolilo didn't let it take him down. He rose to the task. He wrestled through the issues and eventually scaled a $22 million industry into an industry that produced more than $2 billion of funds and indirectly and directly affected close to 50 million Americans. Meet Stephen Biondolilo this week on Jewish Grit. It is a pleasure and an honor to welcome Stephen Biondolilo into our studio. Thank you so much for making the trek here.
Oh, delighted to be here.
So, Stephen, we are definitely going to talk about how you build an industry from, what is it, $20 million to $2 billion?
Yeah.
Okay. And coin a phrase that every organization uses. We'll get to that. But before we get to that, we're going to start at the other end because we know that life is not always roses. There's often thorns. And I think in your personal narrative, definitely you had your fair share of those.
Right.
So if you can bring us into a moment, a time period, either personally or professionally, where you needed your Jewish grit to just survive and then to make it to the next stage of your life so that you eventually can thrive.
My mother was born and raised in an Orthodox Jewish household on the Lower East Side. But my father was her third husband, right? And so she had 2 Jewish husbands, and then when the second of her parents passed away, she sort of left the tribe. And so my father was a Sicilian Catholic. And he died when I was 6 years old. And my brother was 5, my sister was 7 weeks old. And I was the first kid in the neighborhood, certainly in my public school in New York at that time, whose father had died. And, you know, in a working class neighborhood in Queens, it was kind of tough. You know, you're the only kid around without a father, right? So I will tell you that from the age of 6, when my father passed away, I prayed to God every night until I think I was 15 and a half. I finally had my first night in which I wasn't prayerful. I wouldn't go to bed without a conversation with God. That was my stability, right? The point of stability. I spoke with God. I mean, just talking about my day and the challenges and hopefulness for protection, because you're a little kid. And my mother, not that stable. She had never worked. And so she fell into, you know, a situation, again, because of, at that time, it was almost an interracial marriage. You know, this sort of olive Sicilian Italian group and then this Orthodox Jewish group. And neither stepped in to really help meaningfully when my father passed. And so the cycle was, you know, poverty, welfare, other negative things. And within 3 years, she made the hard decision, a decision that I've described as a cross between Sophie's and Solomon's choice, to give up the 2 boys to Philadelphia Orphans Court. So I was living in New York City, but in Philadelphia she had received advice from a Jewish lawyer whose name was Jack Goldberg. And he'd said, there's a school for fatherless boys in Philadelphia. You can give up your children to Philadelphia Orphans Court and steer them towards a placement in that school. And that's exactly what she did. And so I had the good fortune to grow up at Girard College, School for Fatherless Boys, which is now 178 years old, by the way. That was the next level of grit, as you think of it, because you can barely imagine being dropped off in a school with hundreds of boys, and you are no longer the focal point or priority of any adult. And so what do you do there?
Do you remember that moment of being dropped off in the orphanage?
Oh, yeah. I was 9 years and 11 months old. And it's quite an experience because you're being dropped off. Everything's foreign, the way the kids are dressed and, you know, what they do, how they do it, the sort of the rigidity of the environment. I was growing up in a chaotic household for 3 years after my father's death. from the age of 6 to 9, almost 10.
Now, you don't seem like you're a 6'2" fellow.
Correct.
So how do you survive that environment when clearly there's people there that are vying for positions of power and the socio brackets and everything else that goes on in these type of places?
I know Lord of the Flies
Right.
sort of jumped into your mind. So in an all boys environment, athletics is probably the way to assert yourself. And so my sort of greatest original gift from my father was athletic capability. So in fact, Adam on the Alami team had a look at my father boxing in the 1947 Golden Gloves. And so, a lot of athletic capability is genetic, is inherited. So I walked into this school, and frankly, in my age group, I think it was 120 kids or so, I was immediately the best baseball player, for instance. And then
that helps.
That helped. And then I think it's that piece of it, and the next sport that I took up, which is a sport I'm in the National Hall of Fame for, is wrestling. And so I often say, I came into a hard environment in a sense. I don't want to sugarcoat what it was to grow up in an institution. Nevertheless, it provided the stability, the enrichment, all the opportunity in the world. But I came in to a hard environment. It gave me one more thing, like the world's hardest sport, that helped me survive it. Because if you become an accomplished wrestler of all sports, people will leave you alone, won't they? Because you can handle yourselves physically.
Looking back at your life in the rearview mirror, today, a dad, granddad, a very accomplished professional, done so much amazing things for the world, as we'll get to soon.
Yeah.
And you had to rewrite your book. Would you include those few chapters as part of your formative experience, or you just, if you could rewrite it, you'd write some very nice, stable chapters of a loving home?
No, I've already written a book, and the truth of the matter is I've confronted a lot of the sort of insights and situations that I encountered along the way. And I write it in poetry and essay form. And it's quite, for me, it's quite meaningful, obviously. So I wouldn't change anything about my life. That's the key question. Would you, have grown in a family, where, the dad dies, poverty, welfare, and all kinds of negative things unfold. You wind up for 7 years in an institution, wouldn't change a thing.
Wow.
Would not. I was being prepared to manage in this life.
Okay, so let's jump ahead.
Yeah.
So 15, that's where your career at the School for Boys Without Daddies
Right.
Concludes. What do? You go out to college? What happens at 15?
Yeah, it's 16. It's 16. So I graduate high school at 16. I go off to a university.
That's pretty young.
On a full ride. Of course, I go up lots of full rides, because if you're academically talented from the underclass,
I thought it was the wrestling scholarships.
No, I had those too. I was covered all bases. I was just a couple of points of Jewish pride. At the time when I graduated, I think it was the school was 124 years old or 125 years old. And I was the first Jew to be the student body president at that school. So that was sort of, the main student leader of the school. And I was the first one to win the bulk of the Best Athlete Awards at the school. No Jews had ever won. I won 3 out of 4 of the Best Athlete Awards. It's not something the Jews... Now, talk about valedictorians and salutatorians, plenty of Jews, right? But
how does it go? The chances of a Jewish kid playing for a professional team is much slimmer than owning a professional team.
Right, exactly, right. Interesting, and you can believe that, right?
So you go to college. Where'd you go to college?
So I go to college, Boston University,
Great.
undergrad. It was a great school. I was in the English department there at a time when all the humanities were loaded up with rock stars. I'm not certain whether that's true today, but at that time, a wonderful education. I had one woman in particular, Helen Vendler, was the top English language poetry critic, top 2-3 in all of history, and I had a great relationship with her, wrote 10 papers for her, elevated my reading and writing ability extraordinarily. So.
Okay, and then how do you segue into the professional world?
So after Boston University, I have a scholarship to study in France for a year. I do that. And then I make the decision to come back on the PhD track at McGill University in Canada. And in Canada is where I encounter the best wrestling technician, right, coach in all of North America, who happens to be a Soviet Jew who had defected initially from Moldova to Israel, won a medal in the World Championships for them, then came to Canada, defected to Canada, and built the top wrestling club in North America, really, I want to say, at the time. And just to jump to the proof point, he's produced over 40 Olympic and world medalists. I was with him for 3 years, so you have the Jew at the helm of an athletic organization, and I'd encountered more Jewish athletes than I'd ever had in my entire life. In fact, you don't even think you'd ever encounter another one. Most of the environments I'm in, I'm the Jew, right? I represent us in that group of athletes. But here there were a bunch of them, Olympians, world medalists. It was incredible. And so they mentioned the Maccabi Games to me. And so I did the national trials in Canada for the World Maccabi Games, won them, and then represented Canada in Israel in 1981 at the World Maccabi Games.
And then what happened there? Did you win it?
I was second. You know, the kid I wrestled in the finals had the Jewish father and the Christian mother. I had the Jewish mother and the Catholic father. You know, you're bound to have this sort of thing happen, you know. And so they asked the medalists if they'd like to stay and live in the country for a while. So I did, you know, and I was sort of the lead freestyle wrestling athlete in the country. So I was a little pro athlete for 6 months. I said, when am I going to get this chance again? Let's do this. So I did, and it was great. So really, if you think about it, my exposure to the Jewish community, very kind of little. Went to a few Passovers growing up when I was in the orphanage. I insisted on being bar mitzvahed. I had to do that back in New York. My mother had to apply to take me out for a weekend, bring me back to New York. I had to learn my Haftorah under the pillow with the cassette tape. There's no Jewish education or anything Jewish going on at this particular school. So, but I learned how to read and write Hebrew when I was 7 and 8 years old before I went. Didn't forget. Just needed the tune. Came back for a weekend. I was in an Orthodox shul in Queens. I read my Haftorah, or sang it, I should say, and did that. Next stop, BU. I meet a lot of Jewish students from very foreign looking to someone from the underclass like myself. You know, it was kind of very foreign looking crew. So I developed one good group of Jewish friends that I've maintained my whole life. But it was really back to the athletics, the thing that protected me in life when I was a small kid, and then in the orphanage, and then onward. That crew is what created my Israel opportunity, you know, in Canada. So
did you have any point in your life where you could really learn more about the religion other than what you knew growing up from the age of 1 to 9?
No, 1 to 9 was really it. Although in college, I did take a year of Hebrew, right? Figuring I had the advantage that I could at least read and write the letters, even if I didn't know what I was saying or reading, you know. So I did that. Beyond that, I didn't have any Jewish studies. So really and then I was in Israel, you know, as an athlete, you know, for a half a year, living on in a kibbutz that specialized in housing athletes, by the way. Wasn't really, you know, loved the time there. It was interesting. Wasn't receiving much of an education. It really wasn't until 3 years ago in Olami. And I have an Olami mentor, a Rabbi Mendy Gould. And that I really started to get some systematic Jewish education. For the last 3 years, twice a month, I talk with Rabbi Mendy Gould. We talk for an hour and a half, whatever it is. And initially, we were talking to the Bible stories, the principles, the ethics, the this, the that, all wonderful. And now, you know, of course, last little bit, we gravitate towards geopolitics, because how could you not? There's so much mishugas everywhere, you know, in the world with us. So I'm endlessly grateful to Olami for that, because they've really kind of my first systematic exposure and education.
Okay, so let's take a deep dive into your career. Eventually you find the nonprofit space, which is kind of where you launched your career, and you literally revolutionized the world. Tell us a little bit how you got into non-for-profit, then how you came up with the strategy that you had, and then kind of a little bit more about that journey and where it's at today.
something I like to say to young people is we live in a time where strategy is overvalued and opportunity is undervalued. So here I was a kid at the time. I had just gotten married and I had a baby on the way and I needed money. And so I was just looking for money. I'd finished with the graduate school piece. I had been in Israel, and now I'd come back to the States. And I just needed some money, so I was calling the contacts, do you know of anything? And an opportunity arose. We'd received a $9,000 block grant in the north end of Boston to clean up the parks. Would you take that over? I needed money. You do what you have to do. So I took the $9,000, and you think, where would it go? Well, within 5 years, I developed a training program that was training 23 cities and states on how to manage kids and doing environmental improvement projects, and was running a national competition for all of the summer jobs programs in the country focused on cleanup, litter control, anti-graffiti, etc. Take a little opportunity to clean up 12 pocket parks and blew it up. That's just an opportunity. So this was pretty visible in Boston. The next opportunity came. There's a walkathon came to me and said, have you ever been in a walkathon? No. Ever seen one? No. Ever given anyone any money for it? No. We like what you did with the community cleanup that blew up all over the country, and that program was called the Grime Fighter Program and the National Grime Fighter Games. Fun stuff. We like, come look at the walkathon, see what you can make of it. I said, sure, take it. Another opportunity. I knew nothing about the game, right? So we came in, we did take a look. And we did, just using, again, when you don't come up in a system, you can come in with the pure creativity, right? You're not biased in any way. No one's told you this is how it's done. And we developed a lot of insights and techniques that blew the space up. Instantly, within like 6-7 months, we went from, we took this little event over, little, not so little, 400,000, and blew it up into the world's first $1 million walkathon, $1.1 million. Now that was the tantamount to waking up one morning and finding out that the Grover Cleveland Middle School down the street, had a bake sale that raised $1.1 million. You'd say, what was in the brownies, right? And so the bottom line is, it was a shot heard around the world. Press on that was South America, Europe, Soviet Union, everywhere. Press everywhere. And we didn't look back. We produced those events for 7 or 8 years for a variety of different nonprofits, all in the million and multi-million-dollar range, and then developed an educational model that we could use to empower all the nonprofits in the country who use that form of fundraising as a primary finance vehicle. So to understand the space, walkathons were the outgrowth of political protest marching in the 1960s. They morphed initially into a giant wave of crop walks for hunger all over the United States, typically church-based. And then the March of Dimes brought the technique into the public health sector, with which it is now synonymous. It's really all the diseases that you're synonymous, the breast cancer events, before that the AIDS events, et cetera, that use that as a primary way of making money. So we've now worked for 14 national public healths, 28 regionals, including 3 of the top 10 hospitals in the country, et cetera, building capacity in that. 8-9 years as producers, 21 years as trainers. And when you train, you're doing yourself out of business, just so that you know. We created an alumni base of 14,000 people who became expert in this. And as they fanned out, we're running or have run most of the leading players in the country.
What makes you most proud of being a Jew?
As I think of Jews altogether, I mean, when I just love going to the Nobel Prize stat. We're like less than 1% of the world's population and 23% of the Nobel Prizes. You got to just jump to something like that. I mean, the values, or the tikkun olam is a basic value of us expected to repair the world, whether that's by giving or doing. That's got to be top of mind continually. I'm very proud of that.
Think back to when you were 15.
Yeah.
And looking back on those 7 years in the orphanage, or whatever, 6 years in the
7.
7 years in the orphanage. What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Well, first of all, I would say, have faith. It it will be okay. Yehi beseder, yehi beseder, yehi beseder. I would say it's going to be okay. Because, when you're alone and there are no adults that you're the priority of, there's no one's focused on you, right? You're not being, you're being raised in a group, in an institution. You not realize that, right? And it would calm you down a little bit. Would have probably been a calmer, more measured person.
What do you want to tell our 70 to 80,000 young professionals, students all around the world? What do you want to tell them? What's one message you would want to leave them with?
I'm going to reiterate one point, and that is strategy is overvalued and opportunity is undervalued. Get in there and pick up whatever it is and dive in wholeheartedly and do it. You don't know where it's going to lead. We use my story where I'm getting a $9,000 grant to clean up 12 community parks. The next thing, I'm in 23 cities and states with a training program, working with government agencies and doing a national competition to incentivize every kid in the country involved in summer cleanup work. You don't know where things are going to take you. A walkathon that you never heard of, there you go. Next thing you know, you're running you've been the main catalyst in the growth and development of a $2 billion industry, something you never thought of or heard of before. And there you are. Opportunities. Get in. Don't think you have to be the smartest person in the world plotting your life out perfectly, educationally where you go and every other which way. No, things will work out, right? God has a plan. Get in there, work hard, stay focused. Don't make up your mind every 2 minutes whether you like it. Do it. Get the job done. Participate wholeheartedly. Second bit of advice, life is a contact sport. Don't do what I did, which is wait until my late 30s to get my first mentor. Don't do that. Now, go out there right now, look for a mentor while you're in college. Look for a mentor in that first job or two. Me, it took all the way to my late 30s before I connected with a couple of older men who were very successful in business, probably 3 of them that I can think of. And it's like invaluable. It's an invaluable thing. Right now, I think I'm mentoring between 14 and 17 kids. Wow. I mean, because this generation, the younger generations, have a really good sense. They've kind of grown up learning this, whereas someone as old as I am, it really wasn't, thought of, talked of, et cetera, back then. And mind you, what do I have now at my old age? I have an Olami mentor. And so I have for the last 3 years, it's invaluable. I mean, it's priceless sort of mentorship I'm getting from Rabbi Mendy Gould, who's just fantastic. He's even so smart, by the way. I understand he's an educated man and a teacher, philosopher, whatever. He's pretty good at business. I put business problems out, and you can't imagine how this guy can solve them. It's sort of a wonderful thing. So he's like an all-purpose mentor. It's a personal, religious
one-stop shopping.
No kidding. It's incredible.
Stephen, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for sharing about your life. Super inspirational.
Thank you.
And upbeat. And just wanted to give you a little blessing here that you should continue to be successful and find the happiness that you described.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Jewish Grit, an Olami Mentorship podcast. At Olami Mentorship, we believe that everyone needs a mentor. What better way is there to tap into your personal and professional potential than with a Jewish mentor at your side? Learn more at olami.org/mentorship. Don't forget to keep listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.